The conversation ended hours ago. The mistake happened years ago. The relationship is finished. The moment is gone. But your mind replays it anyway. Not once, not casually. It loops. It rewinds tone, facial expression, timing. It edits what you said. It imagines what you should have said. It scans for the exact second everything shifted. It tries to find the point where you could have prevented it. People call this rumination, overthinking, dwelling. But the mind does not replay things for entertainment. It replays what once felt dangerous. You are not obsessing because you enjoy pain. You are replaying because your nervous system still believes there was something to learn that could prevent it from happening again. Repetition is the brain's attempt at control. No child is born replaying conversations. Children feel, react, and move on. They cry, and when comfort arrives, the moment closes. The nervous system resets. What allows closure is not maturity, it is response. When someone helps regulate distress, the brain learns that events end. When response is inconsistent, events don't fully close. Attachment research has described how children rely on caregivers not just for survival, but for emotional completion. If a parent responds predictably, the child's brain learns distress can be processed, connection can be repaired. But if response is unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes volatile, the brain never fully settles. It stays alert. If closeness could disappear without warning, if tone could shift without explanation, if affection could turn into distance overnight, the mind begins searching for patterns. It tries to decode instability. What did I miss? What did I do wrong? What sign did I overlook? This is where replaying begins, not as weakness, but as adaptation. When safety feels conditional, the brain becomes investigative. Children in emotionally inconsistent environments often become quiet observers. They track mood, they monitor atmosphere, they replay moments internally to make sense of unpredictability. Trauma research has long noted how chronic stress wires the brain toward threat anticipation. The nervous system does not wait for danger, it tries to prevent it, and prevention requires analysis. If a parent was overwhelmed, depressed, reactive, or emotionally unavailable, you may have learned to manage yourself early. Parentification doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's simply becoming the one who doesn't add pressure, the one who adjusts, the one who thinks before speaking. You became responsible not just for behavior, but for impact. Impact had consequences. So the mind sharpened. Replaying became rehearsal. Rehearsal became vigilance. Vigilance became identity. Over time, the brain links mistakes with threat, not catastrophic threat, relational threat, loss of connection, withdrawal, disapproval. And because connection in childhood is survival level important, the system treats relational rupture as urgent. Even now, as an adult, your body responds to social missteps as if they could cost you everything. So your mind replays. It does not trust that things are simply over. It searches for what it failed to anticipate. Emotional suppression plays a role here. When you learned early that expressing certain feelings created friction or burdened others, you adapted. Research on emotion regulation has shown how suppression becomes automatic in unstable environments. You don't stop feeling, you postpone feeling. But postponed emotion does not disappear. It looks for another route. It moves into thought. If you couldn't express anger, you analyze it afterward. If you couldn't express hurt, you replay the moment privately. If you couldn't ask for reassurance, you review the interaction repeatedly, searching for evidence that you weren't rejected. Thinking becomes a substitute for resolution, and the nervous system reinforces it. Chronic stress accumulates quietly. The body remains slightly activated even in calm environments. Researchers have described how this ongoing activation, what some call cumulative stress load, keeps the brain scanning long after the original environment has changed. You may live in safety now, but your nervous system learns safety was fragile, so it double checks. Replaying is the mind's way of saying, we cannot afford to miss something again. This often shows up in hyper-independence. If you learned early that relying on others was unpredictable, you may have developed a quiet belief, I need to anticipate everything myself. Replaying conversations is part of that preparation. You try to refine future performance. You try to prevent future embarrassment. Mistakes feel heavy because they once carried weight. Shame deepens the loop. When a child internalizes the idea that their needs, reactions, or errors create inconvenience, the brain becomes preemptive. Researchers who study shame have observed how it narrows attention around perceived flaws. You replay not to indulge pain, but to ensure you are not fundamentally wrong. Did I sound stupid? Was I too much? Did I reveal something I shouldn't have? Shame makes closure difficult, because closure requires self-forgiveness. And if you were trained early to self-forgivenessly, forgiveness feels irresponsible. You learned that being careful kept relationships intact, so the mind keeps working. There is also the matter of unfinished emotion. When a moment ends externally but not internally, the brain does not categorize it as complete. If during childhood you rarely experienced direct repair, clear apologies, explicit reassurance, open processing, the system never learned what resolution feels like, so it tries to simulate it. Replay is an attempt at self. You reimagine the conversation going differently. You picture saying the right thing. You imagine someone responding kindly. You build alternate endings in your head, because real repair once felt rare. This creates a strange temporal distortion. The past remains present. Events that are objectively finished feel unresolved in the body. You may logically know that something is over, but your nervous system does not operate on logic. It operates on memory, and memory, especially emotional memory, does not follow calendar time. Many people who replay events excessively also struggle with rest. When the environment becomes quiet, the mind becomes loud. Stillness removes distraction. Without external tasks, the brain returns to open loops. It scans for what remains unresolved. Calm once preceded disruption, so quiet is not entirely safe. Replaying fills the silence with activity. It feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like you are preventing future harm. But it also keeps you slightly outside the present. When you are replaying yesterday, you are not fully here. And beneath it all is fear not of catastrophe, but of misalignment. If early attachment felt unpredictable, you learned that small missteps could lead to withdrawal. You learned that emotional shifts required vigilance. You learned that comfort was not guaranteed, so you became your own monitor. This is not pathology, it is survival. But survival patterns have costs. Chronic replay increases internal tension. The body responds as if the event is happening again. Stress hormones rise subtly. Muscles tighten. Sleep fragments. The system never fully resets. Over time, this creates exhaustion disguised as thoughtfulness. You may describe yourself as reflective, detail-oriented, deep. But reflection rooted in fear is not the same as reflection rooted in curiosity. One is expansive, the other is defensive. Defensive replay narrows focus around error. It magnifies perceived flaws. It reduces memory to threat analysis. You rarely replay your strengths. You replay your risks. Another quiet cost is disconnection from spontaneity. When every interaction is subject to review, authenticity becomes risky. You filter heavily in real time to reduce replay later. You speak carefully. You adjust tone. You manage impressions. You become safe. But safety achieved through constant self-surveillance comes at the expense of ease. You may long for relief from replaying. You may tell yourself to stop. But telling the mind to stop is like telling a guard dog to sleep while it still believes there are intruders nearby. It does not trust the instruction. The unsettling truth is this: your mind replays things that are already over because, at some point in your life, things were never fully over. Emotional tension lingered. Repair was incomplete. Safety was conditional. So your nervous system learned not to close files. It keeps reviewing them in case there is something left to extract. Healing, if it happens, is not about forcing the mind into silence. It is about slowly teaching the system that relational rupture does not equal abandonment, that mistakes do not equal exile, that connection can survive imperfection. But that lesson contradicts early data. Early data said, pay attention, anticipate, prevent. And so you did. You survived by thinking ahead. The problem is not that your mind replays. The problem is that it does not yet know that danger has passed. What once protected you now keeps you tethered to moments that have no present power. Rest, care, and safety were once conditional. Vigilance filled the gaps. The mind kept watch because it had to. Learning that it no longer has to is not weakness. It is recalibration. And recalibration feels unfamiliar before it feels safe.